In Edmonton, the room was shaking with anger, filled with boos and shouts of betrayal. In Calgary, just a few hours' drive away, the room was silent, save for the scratching of a pen on paper and the flash of cameras. While the screaming in Edmonton got all the headlines on social media, the signing in Calgary just changed the future of your economy. This tale of two cities is the perfect snapshot of Canada right now. On one side, you have the noise, the outrage, and the endless political theatre that has dominated our screens for the last few years. On the other side, you have something we haven't seen in a very long time: competence. The adults have finally re-entered the room. If you are watching this, you probably feel a strange sense of exhaustion when you look at the current state of politics. You are likely a homeowner, someone with a retirement savings plan, or just a citizen who wants the traffic lights to work and the budget to balance. You aren't interested in a revolution. You are interested in results. And for the last few years, you have been politically homeless. You have watched the far left chase ideological purity at the expense of the economy. You have watched the far right chase internet clout at the expense of national unity. But something shifted this week. The most boring word in politics has suddenly become the most powerful force in the country. That word is moderate. And if you are tired of the shouting, I have good news for you. You are finally winning. Let's be honest about why this shift is happening right now. Canadians are looking south of the border, and we are terrified. We see the chaos in American politics, the endless polarization, and the complete breakdown of civil discourse. And the Canadian instinct, the one that defines us as a people, is kicking in. We look at that chaos and we say, "Not here. We value peace, order, and good government. It is in our constitution, and it is in our DNA." But lately, it felt like our politicians forgot that. They started importing that American-style rage, thinking it was the path to power. Pierre Poilievre bet his entire strategy on the idea that Canada is broken and that anger is the only fuel that matters. David Eby, in British Columbia, has been betting on isolationism, thinking he can fight Ottawa and Alberta simultaneously. But they miscalculated something crucial. They forgot that the majority of Canadians, especially those over 50 who actually vote and pay taxes, are tired. We are exhausted by the drama. We don't want a savior to burn down the system. We want a manager to fix the plumbing. And that brings us to the fascinating case of Danielle Smith. What happened to her at the UCP convention in Edmonton is the clearest proof yet that the fringe has lost the plot. Here is a premier who just secured a massive win for her province. She sat down with the federal government and negotiated a landmark energy accord. She didn't flip the table. She didn't storm out. She negotiated. She went in with a list of 9 federal laws that she claimed were hurting Alberta's economy, and she walked out with changes or exemptions to 7 of them. In any business deal on earth, getting 7 out of 9 demands is a landslide victory. That is a 77% success rate. It secures the future of the oil and gas sector. It pushes back the methane emission targets to 2035, giving the industry breathing room. It opens the door for a new corridor to export energy to the world. It is a masterclass in pragmatic governance. And yet, her own base booed her. They screamed at her. Why? Because the fringe doesn't want to win. They want to fight. They would rather have 0 results and keep their anger than have 7 wins and lose their reason to scream. This moment was a revelation. It showed the rest of us that you cannot govern by listening to the loudest voices in the room. If Danielle Smith had listened to those delegates, she would have walked away from the table with nothing. Instead, she chose to be an adult. She chose the economy over the ideology. And that is why the centre is becoming the new power base in Canada. Because the centre is where the math happens, and the math doesn't care about your feelings. Now, let's talk about the other side of that handshake in Calgary. Let's talk about Prime Minister Mark Carney. His arrival has fundamentally changed the temperature of Canadian politics. For years, Justin Trudeau tried to win by appealing to emotions, by focusing on social causes that energized the youth but alienated the business class. Carney is different. He is a central banker. He speaks the language of bond markets, interest rates, and global trade flows. You cannot bully a central banker with a catchy slogan. When Pierre Poilievre shouts that everything is broken, Carney doesn't shout back. He simply opens a spreadsheet. He points to the inflation rate stabilizing. He points to the energy accord, securing billions in capital investment. This is the contrast that is driving the opposition crazy. They have spent years building a machine designed to fight a drama teacher, but now they are fighting an economist, and the attacks aren't landing the same way. The energy accord signed between Carney and Smith is not just a political document, it is an economic insurance policy for your wallet. Think about what this deal actually represents. For the last decade, investment capital has been fleeing Canada because of uncertainty. Global investors looked at us and saw a country at war with itself. They saw provinces suing the federal government. They saw pipelines getting cancelled. They saw regulatory goalposts moving every 6 months. Money hates uncertainty. Money loves boring. This deal creates certainty. It tells the world that Canada has a unified plan for its energy sector for the next decade. It tells investors that they can put billions of dollars into projects without worrying that a political tantrum will shut them down next week. This directly impacts the value of the Canadian dollar. It impacts the stability of our pension funds, which are heavily invested in these sectors. It impacts the value of your home, which depends on a stable national economy. It is boring, unsexy, and absolutely critical for your financial future. And there was a casualty in this shift toward the center. We have to talk about Stephen Guilbeault. His resignation from the cabinet immediately following this deal was the final signal that the era of idealism is over. Carney essentially sacrificed his environment minister to get this deal done. Guilbeault represented the uncompromising wing of the environmental movement. He was a man of principle, but his principles were often at odds with economic reality. By letting him go, Carney sent a ruthless message to the markets. He signaled that this government is now prioritizing pragmatism over ideological purity. It was a cold, calculated move. And for the pragmatic voter, it was exactly what needed to happen. It showed that the government is finally willing to make painful trade-offs to secure the national interest. That is what adults do. Children demand everything they want. Adults realize they have to compromise to keep the lights on. But not everyone has realized that the game has changed. Let's look at British Columbia and Premier David Eby. While Alberta and Ottawa were signing the deal of the decade, Eby was on the sidelines, complaining that he wasn't invited. He called the pipeline proposal an energy vampire. He threatened to use every tool at his disposal to block the lifting of the tanker ban on the North Coast. Now, let's be fair. Eby has a point about protecting his coast. The environmental risks are real, and the consultation with First Nations is non-negotiable. But his political strategy is outdated. In this new era of adult politics, if you aren't at the table, you are on the menu. By taking a hardline stance of total opposition, by refusing to engage in the trade-offs, he isolated British Columbia. He is playing the old game of provincial obstructionism while the rest of the country is moving toward national cooperation. The Team Canada approach that Carney is building relies on provinces working together to compete in a hostile global market. With Donald Trump in the White House threatening tariffs and trade wars, Canada cannot afford internal squabbles. We need a united front. Alberta understands this. Ontario understands this. But BC risks being left out in the cold if it continues to prioritize local politics over national strategy. Isolationism is a luxury we can no longer afford. And then there is Pierre Poilievre. For 2 years, he has had the easiest job in the world. All he had to do was point at the problems and scream. Inflation was high. Blame Trudeau. Housing prices up. Blame the gatekeepers. It was a strategy that worked brilliantly when people were angry and looking for someone to blame. But anger is a finite resource. Eventually, people get tired of being angry. They start wanting things to be fixed. And this is the trap Poilievre is falling into. He is still selling umbrellas, but the rain is stopping. As inflation cools, as interest rates stabilize, and as the federal and provincial governments start actually working together, his message of broken Canada starts to sound out of touch. He is running a noise machine in a country that is suddenly craving quiet competence. And the data backs this up. Look at the latest Nanos polling numbers. These numbers don't lie. and they are telling a story that should terrify the Conservative war room. On the question of preferred Prime Minister, Mark Carney has opened up a 27-point lead over Poilievre. Let me repeat that. 27 points. 52% to 25%. That is not a margin of error. That is a landslide. It tells us that while Poilievre might have a lock on the angry base, he has completely lost the trust of the middle. The average Canadian looks at Carney and sees a prime minister. They look at Poilievre and see a protest leader. In uncertain times, people flock to safety. They flock to the person who looks like they know how to land the plane in a storm. Carney has that aura of professional competence. Poilievre, with his apple-eating videos and attacks on the media, looks like he is more interested in generating likes than generating policy. This gap reveals the rise of the silent majority. This isn't the silent majority that Richard Nixon talked about. This is a new coalition of the board. It is made up of people like you, people who don't post political rants on Facebook, people who don't go to protests with signs, people who are too busy paying their mortgage, raising their kids, and planning for retirement to get involved in the culture wars. You are the pragmatic guardians of this country. You are the ones who actually keep the economy running. And for a long time, you felt ignored because you weren't screaming. But your silence is now deafening. By shifting your support toward the center, towards stability, you are forcing the entire political system to realign. You are telling the politicians that the circus act is over. You are rewarding the handshake and punishing the shout. This is why Danielle Smith had to pivot, even if it meant angering her base. She knows that to win the next election, she needs the moderate suburbs of Calgary, not just the angry rural base. She needs you. This is why Carney is moving the Liberal Party back to the center, shedding the activist wing. He knows that the path to victory runs through your living room, not through a university campus. The middle is not a dead zone, it is the engine room. And right now, the engine is being turned back on. This return to the middle has profound implications for our relationship with the United States. We are facing an administration in Washington that is unpredictable, protectionist, and aggressive. Trump views trade as a zero-sum game. If he wins, you lose. To survive next to a giant like that, Canada cannot be divided. We cannot have provinces fighting trade wars with each other while we are trying to negotiate with the Americans. The Energy Accord is a signal to Washington as much as it is to Canadians. It says that Canada is getting its act together. It says we are ready to be a serious supplier of energy and critical minerals. It says we are a reliable partner, not a chaotic neighbor. Reliability is a currency. In a world where supply chains are breaking and alliances are shifting, being the boring, stable country is a massive competitive advantage. It attracts investment. It secures jobs. It protects your pension. So, when you see the clips of people booing in Edmonton, don't be discouraged. See it for what it is. It is the death rattle of the outrage era. It is the sound of a fringe realizing that they are no longer driving the bus. They are loud because they are losing. And when you see the photos of the signing ceremony in Calgary, don't just see two politicians. See the return of reason. See the return of the adults to the room. We don't need to agree on everything. In fact, democracy works best when we disagree respectfully. But we need to agree on the basic reality of how the world works. We need to agree that compromise is necessary. We need to agree that economic stability matters more than political scoring. We are watching a correction in the market of ideas. The stock of Anger Incorporated is crashing. The stock of Competence Limited is soaring. And for those of us who have been waiting for this moment, it feels like a breath of fresh air. It feels like we can finally stop worrying about politics every single day and get back to living our lives. That is the ultimate promise of the center. It promises that politics will become boring again so that your life can become interesting. It promises that the government will do its job quietly so that you can do yours. So, where do we go from here? The next few months will be critical. We will see if David Eby decides to join the team or stay on the island. We will see if Pierre Poilievre can pivot from anger to answers, or if he will double down on the noise. And we will see if this fragile alliance between the Liberals and the UCP can actually deliver shovels in the ground. There will be bumps in the road. There will be more shouting from the fringes. But the direction of travel has changed. The ship is turning, and, for the first time in years, it feels like there is a steady hand on the wheel. If you are watching this and nodding along, if you see yourself as part of this pragmatic majority, then you have a role to play. Don't let the loud minority dominate the conversation anymore. Talk to your friends. Talk to your neighbors. Tell them that it is okay to want compromise. Tell them that it is okay to support a deal that isn't perfect, as long as it moves the country forward. The adults are back in charge, but they need your support to stay there. Don't join the shouting, join the building. If you found value in this analysis, if you appreciate a look at politics that respects your intelligence instead of insulting it, then I invite you to subscribe. We are building a community here for the pragmatic guardians, for the people who want to understand the signal, not the noise. Thank you for watching. And remember, in a room full of children screaming for attention, the most powerful person is the one who sits quietly and gets the work done. See you in the next one.